You know, when we think of space, we often picture this majestic, silent frontier. But the reality is, it's probably the most unforgiving environment we've ever tried to conquer. Survival out there, it's measured in seconds and millimeters. So today, we're going to dive into some of the most absolutely harrowing survival stories from off-planet, tales of when the tech failed, and the only thing left was human resilience. Okay, I want you to just picture this for a second. You're on a spacewalk. You're weightless, connected to the International Space Station by just a tether, and you've got this incredible view of the Earth just silently turning below you. It's supposed to be another day at the office, right? But then you feel something. This weird sensation at the back of your head. It's cold, and it's wet. Well, those are the chilling words of astronaut Luca Parmitano describing the very beginning of an absolute nightmare. I know, it sounds totally impossible, doesn't it? How on earth can you drown in a vacuum? But this isn't some sci-fi plot. That cold, wet feeling he had, that was a leak from his spacesuit's cooling system. And because of the totally unique environment of orbit, it turned into a life-threatening crisis in just a matter of minutes. So the physics behind this whole terrifying event is what makes it so specific to space. See, here on Earth, if water leaked into your helmet, it just dripped down and pulled at the bottom. But in zero-G, there is no down. Thanks to something called surface tension, the water just clung to every single surface it touched, including Luca's face. It was literally creeping across his skin like some kind of malevolent blob. You can just imagine the escalating panic. First, the water gets into his ears, and boom, he can't hear mission control anymore. He's totally deaf to the outside world. Then it keeps spreading, creeping over his eyes and his nose. Now he's blind. So think about that. He can't hear, he can't see, and he's actually starting to choke. The only way he could get back to the airlock was to rely completely on his memory of the route and the feel of his safety tether, blindly trying to get back to safety before he completely ran out of air. Parmitano's incredible story, it just perfectly illustrates the main point here. Space gives you absolutely zero room for error. The barrier between life and instant death is nothing more than the thin wall of a spacesuit or a spacecraft. Any failure, no matter how tiny, can be completely catastrophic. And hey, just to put our little corner of the solar system into perspective, just take a look at our neighbors. If your life support failed on Venus, you wouldn't just suffocate. No, you'd be instantly crushed by pressure that's 92 times greater than Earth's. Or what if you were on the dark side of Mercury? You'd be flash frozen at minus 180 degrees Celsius. This is the brutal reality that astronauts are working in every single day. And of course, you just can't talk about survival in space without talking about the most famous near disaster of all time, the Apollo 13 mission. This wasn't just some small equipment failure. This was a catastrophic explosion that left 3 men stranded in what was, for all intents and purposes, a dead spacecraft. And this is what makes their story so absolutely terrifying. They were 200,000 miles from home. Let that sink in. Not in low Earth orbit where, maybe a rescue could be possible. No, they were in deep space, on their way to the moon. There was no help coming. They were completely, utterly on their own. The whole crisis started with a simple, totally routine command: stir the oxygen tanks. But a spark from some damaged wiring ignited the pure oxygen inside, and the command module was crippled. The astronauts had to shut everything down and scramble into the lunar module, a tiny little craft designed for only 2 men to land on the moon, not to keep 3 guys alive for a 4-day journey all the way back to Earth. Their life inside that lunar module was just brutal. To save every last drop of power, they shut down nearly everything, and the temperatures just plummeted to near freezing. They had to ration water so strictly that they became severely dehydrated. And all the while, these brilliant minds back at Mission Control were working around the clock, literally inventing new procedures on the fly to get them home, including that famous square peg in a round hole problem with the CO2 scrubbers. So, we've seen the dangers of the cold, silent void. But now, let's flip the script to a totally different, but just as terrifying scenario. Imagine you're not in a dead ship, but in one that is actively trying to kill you from the inside out. Well, back in 1997, aboard the Russian space station Mir, that exact nightmare became a reality. And the source of this disaster was, so ironically, a piece of equipment that was supposed to keep the crew alive. It was a solid-fuel oxygen generator. You can basically think of it as a chemical oxygen candle. It malfunctioned. But it didn't just quietly fail. It failed violently. It just erupted. It was like a blowtorch, spewing a jet of fire and molten metal everywhere. Within seconds, the entire module was filled with this thick, acrid, toxic smoke.
You can't see, you can barely breathe, and there is a fire raging inside a sealed metal can that you can't escape from.
And here's the crucial part. The fire wasn't just a threat to their air, it was physically blocking the path to one of their Soyuz escape capsules. So, abandoning ship? Not an option for half the crew. They were trapped. They had no choice but to stand and fight. So the crew threw on gas masks and just started fighting the fire completely blind, taking turns with fire extinguishers in that dense smoke. They actually managed to put it out, but it was unbelievably close. I mean, they extinguished the last of the flames just moments before the station's atmosphere would have become completely toxic and unbreathable for good.
So when you look at all these stories together, drowning inside a helmet, being stranded in deep space, fighting a fire in orbit, you start to see this incredible common thread. In every single case, the technology failed catastrophically. And in every single case, it was human ingenuity, staying calm under just unimaginable pressure, and the sheer raw will to live that made the difference between survival and total disaster.
Which, it kind of leaves us with this one final thought. We know the risks, we've seen just how razor thin that margin for error really is, and yet, we keep going. So what is it? What is that fundamental drive in us that makes us look up at the stars and say, yeah, despite all that danger, we have to go? It's a question really worth thinking about.